Welcome to the Strategic Project Leader, where we help you leverage strategic project management so you can achieve your goals. Now, here's your host, Ola Alabi.
Good morning and welcome to the Strategic Project Leader. Yes, it's another great show today because we're going to be diving into all things strategic leadership and strategic project management. Yes, on the Strategic Project Leader, we are at the frontier of elevating strategic leadership and the project management discipline to help lead change, technology, and create sustainable solutions that drives success for organizations and the global economy. I am your host, always excited to be here. I am just passionate about this because project management and strategic leadership has transformed everything around me, my career, my business, and my life. And so every time I have a chance to share this with my community, I am always excited. Today is a great one because I have a leader all the way from Luxembourg. Here's one who has helped shape strategy. When we talk about people who are passionate about change, who want to elevate when it comes to leading and helping make better strategic decisions, this is your man. He brings a wealth of experience helping CEOs and their teams design and implement winning strategies to drive growth and boost performance. He's also a professor of management and innovation. Think about that. He also educates, he helps elevate. And I love the fact that he just calls himself, he's just an advisor. But believe it or not, we've got so much to unpack today. Join me as I bring on stage Dr. Marc Sniukas. Help me join it. How are you doing today, Dr. Marc? He didn't even put a doctor next to his name. That's how humble he is. He never wants you to just let you know that that's exactly what he is. But let us know in the comments first where you're joining us from so we can get right into it. First off, Dr. Marc, how are you doing this wonderful evening for you and morning for me?
Hi, yeah. Thanks a lot for having me, and nice to be on the show. Doing good. So it's been a quiet Saturday so far.
Quite a Saturday, as he has said, and we're just gonna be bumping it up to the next level, taking up a notch. I am coming at you live from Calgary, Alberta. I'm finally home. I've been traveling for a while, so it's definitely great to be back in Canada, enjoying the sunshine, the little bits of summer. So let us know in the comments where you're definitely joining us from while we get right into it. We've got so much to unpack, Dr. Marc. So today, first of all, when we think about strategy and making better strategy, what does strategy even mean in the first place?
Mm-hmm. I think on a very generic kind of level, you can think of strategy as solving your business problems, right? So, the origins of strategy go back to military, etc. So it was all about solving a problem in order to win. And I think that is something that has gotten lost on us today. So lots of organizations, when they say strategy, they mean lots of different things, and usually it involves some kind of long-term planning, but it's not really focused anymore on solving particular challenges, problems they have on their way to achieving their visions or their ambitions. So to make it simple, it's really about you focus on solving your most challenging problems. You're muted, Vola.
Solving your most challenging problems. It seems like my microphone, I hope that's going to be a problem today, but we're going to get through this. When we think about organizations, we're in business to solve a problem or create a solution, period, right? Organizations are here to either, make customer service better, to create a product, a service, a solution. And SAT strategy sits at the backbone to make that actually happen. So when we want to connect this and we think about problem solving, as project professionals, we've got leaders here who they've been there right at the back end executing on projects. How can we even think about this and connect strategy with project execution?
I think at the end of the if you think about strategy, so on a generic level, it's about solving problems. Obviously, then we talk about business strategy. There are very particular problems that you solve that have to do with how are you going to position your company, who is your ideal customer, what products and services you're going to offer, how you differentiate yourself from everybody else in the market. And then ideally, as you go through the process, the outcome of that thinking should be clear strategic initiatives or strategic projects that you need to kind of make it all happen. Right? So it should be, that's for me the link where we come out of a strategy exercise. We have strategic moves, strategic initiatives that have been defined, which then need to be turned into projects so that you can actually implement them. Right? And then the is to be coherent in the activities and the projects that you're actually going to put in place.
I love that. The fact that you said strategy gets set and we get projects actually get executed as a byproduct of that strategy. But let's go into the, a typical day in the day of the C-suite executives. They come in and they're like, we need to set strategy. We need to set up the plan to drive our organization. A lot of our professionals who are PMs, who are project directors or PMO, vice presidents, whatever, at times they're not part of those conversations. So what happens in a typical strategy setting session?
Well, so typically what we do is, so first of all, I would say it's not just one session. That's somehow something that companies still like doing, disappear on a retreat for 2 days and then you have a strategy. But in my experience, it's more time and thinking strategy, have a solid stretch. But basically, there are three things that you need to do. The first one is to understand what's going on. So we talked about the challenges. So you want to understand what is actually keeping us from achieving our ambitions. And that can be something kind of reviewing your actual strategy at the moment, what is working, what is not working, looking at what's happening outside of the organization, what is happening with competitors, what is happening with changing maybe customer behavior. And it's also about looking internally. Very often, strategic challenges have nothing to do with the market, or they have nothing to do with competition, but they have to do a lot with what is happening in your company, what's keeping you from achieving your ambitions inside of your organization. So it could be bad processes, it could be a dysfunctional culture, these kind of things. So that's the first thing that you need to do. So understand what's going on. And then out of that, you want to have a priorities in terms of these are the opportunities we might need to seize on the external, and these are the challenges that we need to solve on the internal. Right? And then from there, you go into developing your strategy. As I said, very often then developing the strategy, it's about what are the products and services we want to sell to whom, who's our ideal customers, how do you reach them, what are the channels we're using, what are the activities that we want to do or that we are good at as a company, where do we need to partner, what kind of capabilities do we might need to get from the external, and most essentially also how are we going to win. So how are we going to differentiate ourselves, how are we going to make a margin and make a profit. And then the final step is really thinking about how are we going to bring this all into the company. So again, what are the capabilities we need to build? What are the strategic initiatives we need? What are the projects we need? So that is what kind of then the project professionals, the PMOs, and so they see is these initiatives.
I think it's really important that people actually listening, you understand that before a project gets set up, there are conversations that happen to drive whatever initiatives and projects actually need to get kicked off. And the conversations that happen look beyond just looking at time, budget, and scope. We're now looking at bigger markets. We want to understand, how do we position ourselves? How do we ensure that we become even like probably market leaders, or how do we ensure we achieve our sustainability goals and stuff? So what would you say are the skill sets that project professionals probably need to have to begin to start understanding at this, the next level, to be able to move up vertically in the organization so that they can actually stand a chance to, pretty much to land those very, very top positions and be part of these conversations?
So I think it's a good point that you made there. Is an interesting point that you made there. Is, very often we see the project managers, the project leaders, they only see these initiatives. And when they only see the initiatives, but what happens very often is that they focus really on kind of ticking the boxes whether this stuff is getting implemented. And it becomes more of a, very often, unfortunately, I see PMOs who have more of a controlling kind of attitude. We have these tasks and they need to be done, and they forget the bigger picture. They forget that strategic objective and the outcome that you actually want to achieve, right? So when I work with PMOs, and just now worked with a large client where we set up we set up a transformation office, they call it. So they had people from a more traditional PMO background. They had people from quality assurance, people from continuous improvement, and we all pulled them together into one team. And they called it a transformation office, which is there to support the organization in implementing the strategy. So the attitude should be one of wanting to enable and support the rest of the organization, and less kind of controlling, ticking the boxes kind of attitude. And so going back to your skills, so it's really that being able to make sense of what's going on again. So there is some analytical mindset that is required, and kind of being able to have a big picture of what's happening. And then there is also some creativity involved. So there is this how do you go from the analytics, the analytical part to developing a strategy is very often a creative exercise. So many people think that if you do an analysis, you can kind of like deduct a strategy from that, or the strategy will logically fall out of your analysis, but that's not really what happens. The analysis is really just understanding what's going on, but then the creative act has to be around how can we solve that particular challenge, and what does it mean to develop a strategy. So I would also look into learning about what is strategy. So what is a framework that you can use. I like using the Roger Martin Playing to Win framework, for example, a lot. There are others around. At the end of the day, it's not so important which one you use, because they're all quite similar. They use different words, but they all talk about the same thing at the end of the day. Also, it's really understanding that, but picking one and sticking with it. And then also, if you pick one, there's a good reason why all these components are in these frameworks. So it's not about, oh, I just do these two, and the other two, I don't think they're important, and we'll leave it out. No, at the end of the day, they're all important, and you gotta cover all of them.
You have hit a couple of points yet. I want to break this down. You spoke about creating a transformational office from a typical PMO to create something that's more strategic. Because for me, over the years, having worked, within and set up PMOs, I have found that a lot of project management offices specifically have always failed because of that kind of linear and tactical approach. I'm about setting up strategy realization offices where they are focused on helping realize strategic goals and objectives. The teams are set up and they understand the why behind the business. They get the teams together to get a project to actually execute on that actual strategy. And so they're creating transformations, they're creating change, but they have that dotted line right at the very top, and they understand the why and they can actually get results. And I want us to break it up for people who are actually listening. They wonder, like, I'm just a project manager or I'm working within a PMO, and it seems like my job is so tactical and rudimentary. How can they start by elevating? So what were the steps you took to help, create a shift from the tactical piece and the controlling like a PMO to become more transformational that could actually drive strategy? What were the steps that you took?
Yeah, so I think it's really about the attitude. So how do you live your job? How do you see or define your job as of controlling, or is it supporting the organization to get stuff done, right? I think it's also kind of moving out of this. I do it as a project manager, so I in charge of the project to again more this enablement. I think that at the end of the day, leaders are in charge of doing strategy and implementing strategy, right? And it's not something you can outsource to an external consultant, or that you can out to a PMO office. The organization doing strategy. And PMO office or strategic transformation or whatever you want to call it, you can support. And support means that you orchestrate the process, for example, that you provide tools like frameworks that the organization can use to structure the discussions around strategy every level in the organization. Think about how to involve people throughout the organization so that they buy into the strategy, they're committed to the strategy, they contribute to the strategy, and shift their behavior towards what you want to see coming out of the strategy.
So pretty much you've said that there is a mindset that project professionals needs to have. That's one. In order to drive change, they need to understand that there's a bigger picture in play. There's also an element where C-suite executives needs to also bring about the change in that collaboration and what needs to happen. However, when we find the product professionals kind of stuck within a particular bubble and they just get handed projects, and at times it's like this actually adds no value, but there's a full disconnect. Because I want us to see how can we start moving, the arrow back. I can see you smiling now to create that connection, because now it's in a perfect world where we have everything set. We've got leaders like you can come in and shape. There's always that communication throughout the life circle. You're coming back to C-suite executive, the PMs are connected. But a lot of the time that doesn't really happen. It's just a case of some offsites happen. We kind of set whatever goals, project actually initiated. There's like PMs are like, where exactly do I really start? Why are we really doing this? How can we start fixing that? How can we create a full spectrum from strategy design through benefit realization and start creating that connection with the baby steps? What can we do today where there is that disconnect that already exists?
Yeah, so I think that we still have some echo. You mute your. Yeah, thank you. So I was smiling before because it actually happens a lot that what an organization is doing is not really aligned to the strategy, and then you have projects that come up because people think it is an important project, and it might well be a very important project for one area of the organization, but it doesn't really necessarily contribute to the strategy. So I think to make that connection, at the end of the day, your strategy and whatever you're doing on a daily basis in the business should be one. And very often I know that strategy is perceived as something on top. It's additional work that needs to be done next to your daily work, but strategy implementation, execution is all about closing that gap. And so to do that, I mean, if you get a project, it's really always about questioning or figuring out what is the contribution it does to the strategy. So that's where, as a project manager, also, if you're being handed such a thing, you can start challenging that maybe a little bit. Challenge what is really the contribution to the strategy? How does it need to be shaped, the project or the initiative, so that it does have a contribution to the strategy? So I think that's something where you can start really as baby steps, right? And then it doesn't take a lot of effort. It might need, depending on the culture, a little bit of courage to be challenging the projects that you're being handed. But there again, so again, depending on how large the organization is, what I typically do is we establish some kind of mechanism where projects get rated, right? Where projects get evaluated on what is the strategic topics or themes or priorities that it contributes to, how soon or what kind of challenges it's going to help, how soon can we expect an impact, these kind of things, right? And that's something that I think a PMO should typically do, also set up that kind of evaluation, which is connected to the strategy, so that not every project that kind of comes up, and even if there is a budget and even if there is resources, gets done. But no, you focus on stuff that is actually helping the strategy.
So we have gotten to a point where you question now, we have those questionnaires and stuff. You spoke about a framework. I know you said you use the playing to win framework. Can you walk us through this framework for PMs who are like, so what kind of framework can I start using? I want to understand strategy. I want to be able to make better strategy. What does that look like?
Yeah, sure. So the Playing to Win framework is it's a book called Playing to Win, actually written by Lev Leedy, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, and Roger Martin, who's a professor and consultant. And so they have developed this Playing to Win framework, which they use at Procter & Gamble, and it has 5 components. So the first component is what they call a winning aspiration. So what is kind of your vision, your ambitions? What is your target? Where do you want to get to? Then the second component is deciding where to play, which involves picking your customers, the products and services you want to offer these customers, the channels about how you're going to reach these customers, and the activities in the value chain that you want to focus on. So as I said before, what are the activities that we want to be engaged in as a business, and where do we need to partner, what do we need to outsource, and these kind of things. The third component is all about how to win. So how are we going to win? Are we going to win because we are low cost classically, or whether we differentiate? Now, Roger Martin is very clear on there is only low cost or differentiation, but there are other value propositions that you can think of. There is the Tracy and Vesima, which talks more about You can have either operational excellence, which is kind of a little bit low cost, so that's what your business is good and you win because you're very good when it comes to operational excellence. Or the second value proposition, positioning kind of thing would be product leadership. So this is really more about innovation. You have cutting edge, next level products and services. So that's why you win and that's how you differentiate. Or you differentiate because you have a very good customer relationship, customer intimacy, they call that. So this is the how to win kind of thing. And then the fourth element goes more into the implementation. So this is asking about what capabilities do we need to make our strategy happen. So what are the skills we need? And you can think a little bit larger about capabilities also, maybe in terms of what are the resources you need, what are maybe partnerships that you need access to make your strategy happen. And then you also need to think about how are we going to get these capabilities if you don't have them, right? Do we build them ourselves? Do we buy them? Do we partner with somebody so we can outsource these things? And then the fourth component is what they call management systems. So this is really more about how are you going to manage strategy execution? How are you going to manage the development of the capabilities that you need to implement your strategy? So that's basically the five key components of the.
It's interesting. Yeah, when we even think about that, a lot of the times project professionals who really are at the strategic level should already be thinking about these areas, even within your project, right? You should think about what capabilities do I actually need, what exactly where are we trying to like get into? It's just that at an organizational level, there's like an upgrade. If I use that particular word, they are looking now even bigger beyond just your project, beyond just your program or your portfolio. Now they have to look at every single element that connects into play, how it ties in, how we look at competition as well. And the key, especially for the Strategic Project Leader podcast and Strategic Project Leader as an organization, we want to create the next frontier of project professionals who are able to take on the challenge of this complex vocal world, where you can actually be prepared and equipped to become those people, like those CEOs who can actually change and lead organizations. Now that we know that, there's this bigger picture that we have to think, we have to break it down. When you think about this, what else do you think project professionals need to start thinking about today? So we've spoken about like their skill sets. There's that strategic thinking, there's a bigger picture, there's market, there's analytical skills. What else do you feel is a missing link from your experience that is needed within project management discipline?
Yeah, so as we discussed earlier, the echo again, sorry. As we discussed earlier, at the end of the day, it's people who have to implement all of these things, right? So you have to involve the people from throughout the organization in ideally already strategy making, so at the front end, and then help them to enable them to get these things done and to implement the strategy, work on the strategy, be able to adapt their activities, their behavior to what you need from the strategy side. So I think this is where project leaders then need a lot of that leadership skills. For project professionals need leadership skills and the human-centered skills of making these things happen. So you have the analytical skills at the top of the funnel, if you like, at the beginning of the process, which is really about understanding what is the problem, what's going on, and then the more creative part when it comes to coming up with solutions about how to solve these problems. And then in the third step, you have the leadership skills, where it's all about implementing your strategies and taking people along.
And I want us to get into the place where I know you shine. It's all about making better strategies. What exactly does that look like? Because having a strategy is one thing. Everyone says, I have one. Organizations have one. But what is that icing on the cake when we talk about better strategy, Dr. Marc?
Yeah, so it goes back to this idea of many organizations stay engaged in something they call strategy, but it's not really strategy. So it might be some kind of planning. So having lots of different goals or lots of different activities, and basically, everybody, like marketing says, we want to do this, and then we have a plan for that, and then manufacturing says we want to do this, and then you have a plan for that. So you end up with lots of incoherent kind of activities and projects maybe and initiatives that don't really contribute to a strategy. And that's where this better strategy or good strategy comes into play. So this idea of what is actually strategy in the first place and what is a good strategy. So it is not necessarily about long-term plans, which very often are just financial, but it's about, again, focusing, as I said, on opportunities and challenges. It's not necessarily about what are we going to be, or where do we want to be in the next 5 years, but it's really what can we do now? What is the next kind of challenge that we need to overcome in order to achieve maybe our longer term vision. It is about opening up the strategy process, so involving more people throughout the organization in the entire process instead of doing it behind closed boardroom doors. It is about turning strategy, as I call it, always on, so that kind of having strategic conversations in an ongoing way, and it's not just something that you do once a year and then you have a nice 200 PowerPoint deck that disappears in the drawer that nobody's going to look at again, and then in 2 years you might take it out again and say, oh, we had that strategy, let's look how we're doing. That's not how it works. So doing all these things and all these shifts, as I call them, this is what enables you to do better strategy or good strategy in the first place.
I think a lot of the time, the outcomes of this strategy is all about decisions, because organizations need to decide on something, whatever that looks like. What kind of frameworks do you help your clients go through when it comes to decision making? Because it's like decisions, problems, challenges, or like, we just need to make decisions. How do you help it, even as project professionals, even within their projects? They are making decisions every day. So decision making, I know, is key and is top when I was going through your framework. And just for everyone to listen, at the end of this as well, Dr. Marc has a free resource that everyone can actually get to download. You just need to we're going to put a link in the comments as well. So that's actually coming. You can go through a lot of this there as well. So decision making, what framework do you go through to help clients make better decisions?
So I think the first thing is what decisions do you need to make, right? And here it depends a little bit on what kind of strategy level we're talking about. So if we're talking about corporate level strategy, the big decision is what businesses we want to be in, and how integrated we want to be, or how diversified we want to be. And then the next kind of level is business level strategy, as I said. And this is something like the Roger Martin to win framework, where we decide about ambitions, where how to play, and so on and so forth. Right? So that's the kind of decisions you need to take. Then something that is particularly interesting is decisions about what problems should we focus on. And I have a framework there which I call the strategy triage. So it's always about what I'm asking about. So does the challenge, does it impact the entire organization or just a part of the organization? And the second dimension is, does it impact the challenge? Is it a threat to the survival of the company or not? Like as an example, if you have challenges in your working capital, so you're building up your inventories, you're bad at collecting your payments, so you have a cash flow problem at some point. So usually a cash flow problem, it's not impacting only one part of the organization, and it's a threat to your organization. So if you have something like this, that's more important and should be prioritized over, HR getting a new system, because currently they're working on Excel and they want to have a computer system to manage employees better. So that's kind of one of the things that you can, one of the ways you can look at, so how to make sure you're really focusing on important decisions.
So pretty much we have probably areas around people like impact, risk, the financial implications of what this decision is actually going to be, like what kind of exposures. And so a lot of times, because I really want my project professionals to start thinking about this, even within your project level, you always have to do like maybe risk assessments. You look at a current risk on your risk register and you wonder, what's the impact? Who exactly does it impact, and what's the financial exposure? At a strategic level as well, you need to start thinking about within every decision. We need to understand, is this a regulatory implication that, when it comes to this? Does it actually affect our positioning, across different markets? How does it impact our customers as well? So it's this kind of elevation that you need to do it and taking it to the next level. So when you go through that, when you prioritize, how do you get to prioritize this with your clients? And so when you've triaged all of this, they know that these are the implications of the risk. What else do you walk through? Is there anything else, that any like secret formulas that we need to know that we could take home and
one bit is this prioritizing problems, where we have this triage, for example, and the other bit is then how do you evaluate strategic options and solutions that you have developed, right? And here, as if we're talking about business strategy, it always has to do obviously with the market somehow. So you want to evaluate, do customers actually want this? So if we're doing something, we're introducing a new offering, we're changing our products, do customers want this? So that's something that you need to check or evaluate somehow, and it can be very easy. From one workshop to the next, for example, I just asked the executives to call up a couple of customers and talk to them, say, look, listen, we here's something we want to do. Is this something you would be interested in or not? For example, then obviously, yeah, you talked about the financial impact. So you want to evaluate that somehow, right? Look at can we afford to do it? What is the business impact that we are expecting? Should we do it? Is it a good idea from a strategic perspective? Is it a good idea from a financial perspective? And you always want to look at obviously the feasibility. So do we have the capabilities? We talked about capabilities. So do you have the capabilities to make it happen or not? You also talked about risk a lot. I mean, strategy, there is always risk. So, I mean, there is no strategy. Even if you have a good strategy, it's not a guarantee that you will be successful, because you're always trying to do something about the future. And there is always a risk inherent to that. And if there is a big strategic change, for example, it becomes even more riskier. So the question is not, is there a risk or not? But the question is more, how can we mitigate the risk? So how can we take small steps? How can we maybe experiment with whether the customer wants this or whether we can do this, so that you gradually kind of work your way up to a good strategy that actually works. Which brings me also back to this idea of whether I mentioned it briefly before, always on strategy. So this idea that strategy is not something you do once and then you go about implementing it and then maybe in 2 years you check whether it works or not, but it's an ongoing thing. It's an iterative thing. So you do something, you test whether it works, you get some feedback from the market, you get feedback from the organization, and you use that feedback then for the next loop and the next iteration. And as you keep on doing this, the maturity of your strategy goes up and your strategy becomes better and better.
This is a perfect segue for Project Lifestyle. Today we've been talking about strategy. But now I want to think about this. How do we relate this for our personal development? How can we think about strategy and then you understand and say, how can I even leverage this to create a better life for myself? Dr. Marc has touched on so many different elements, different aspects. But when I look back and I think, when you create a strategy, you're creating this because there's something you want to solve. Is either a challenge or you can see it as an opportunity. And so I thought about this and I said, how can I help you organize and recognize where problems actually exist? And how can you put that together to create something that you can then have a plan to help deal with? First off, I say, search back and go and do like an assessment and understand where are the discrepancies even in your life. Where think about your current state. Where people can come back to say, I can see some challenge, I can see some issues. Think about that. Gather that information. And also try and string out and understand where are the patterns of change. Ask yourself why. Even as a product professional, right? You do the 5 whys. You ask yourself why. What exactly is going on? Why is this happening? The key here is about identifying the root causes of a problem. We want to know, what is that problem? I'm trying to see, how can we wrap our heads around a problem statement? Because before you put together a strategy that's obviously going to be ongoing, we need to understand, what are we trying to solve? Then sit back and do a brainstorm. You do it and say, what exactly have I seen that isn't really working? What are the potential issues? What are the potential challenges? Gather inputs from people around you, be it colleagues at work, friends at home. Holistically, look at that, gather the data, and then examine everything. Compare what already exists and put together a solid problem statement. Because at the end of the day, you could want to change anything. I'll give you an example. I sat down and I had to do like a full assessment even of my life and say, where do I want to be in the next 5 years, at a longer term? I had to create a plan. But before I could create a plan, I had to understand, where were the gaps? Where were the challenges? I sat with my spouse to say, I know that I had to create, for instance, I wanted to create a course because there was a gap. But I knew that there were some other things that I had to do. He sat there and he said, Yafola, there is a problem. Because in order to do this, you need to do some research. You need to, go back to school. There's one of the things I wanted to do. But in every element, I sought feedback because I wanted to create something that was rich. And I was able to create like a problem statement and create a plan to actually address it. My challenge to you is, how do you address challenges when they come? You'd always need to go back to the root and understand what exactly is a problem and what are the potential challenges you're looking to face and to resolve, so you can create a solution to actually deal with that. Professor, when we think about creating problem statement, I know you don't like being called that a lot. You smiled a little bit. Dr. Mark, it's always a pleasure. Identifying, creating problem statements, because I think that's very, very important at the very front end. That feeds into strategy. How do you work with your clients to identify, what the challenge is, what the opportunity really is in the market, and how they can actually leverage that and create something better?
So it all starts with the question of what is working and well and what is not working. So that's where we start with discussing the challenges, and then look at what is causing us problems, where is our strategy working, what is not working, what is working in our organization, what is working in our organization, and then you always want to again kind of try what is the root cause, or identify the root cause of these things, and prioritize why these things are important for your business, for your people, for your organization, for your customers.
Now it's questions and answer time from the audience. We have been diving into it. We've had a lot of comments and stuff flowing. I just need to go back now and look at them. So a couple of questions that have been coming through. Let's start with the first one. When we think about strategy for project professional who is operating at a tactical level, what is the path to chart a path to senior leadership where they can really impact strategy fully?
So I think what you should be doing probably is to question projects and evaluate projects, whether they are strategic or not, right? And if you're handling the project and you don't really understand what is the contribution it does to the strategy, you can just really ask, right? Kind of engage in the conversation around, so how does this project help us? What is the strategic problem it's solving? That's another one. One of the prioritization techniques that I use. I ask people if they have ideas for strategic initiatives or strategic problems, we just map them out. And then I would ask them to kind of be clear about what is really the strategic initiative about. So why are we doing it? What is the content of it, if you like? What is needed? How are we going to do it? To see whether they are clear on that or not. And I also ask about, so what is the particular challenge that it actually solves? And if nobody can really tell me what the challenge is, then I say, well, this might not be really a good initiative to spend time and resources on. So very often these are pet projects by somebody in the organization who just likes to do it. But then we try to kind of eliminate these things. So I think that's where, project professionals can also help their leaders in that sense to be engaged in conversations that help their leaders to be more strategic and think more clearly around the things that they want to solve, right? The objectives they want to reach.
I think critically, project professionals need to start seeing themselves as strategic outcome drivers. They are there to help provide solutions. And so within their roles is about, how do you show up and become the catalyst that actually drives that change for organizations? And so I know you've actually addressed it, where you say, when you have those skill set that shows that you understand where the organization is going, how you show up daily, and how you connect to that. So when you're within even your teams, when you're showing up, you're having these conversations with, all the leaders as well. They can begin to see that this particular person kind of understands, like, it's beyond just your particular role. How are they adding value at a bigger level, and how can they actually impact that? I also want us to touch, and I know we're going to, let me just get another question as well before I dive into this quickly. When it comes to creating better strategies, what are the steps and frameworks have you also used?
Well, it's really the strategy launchpad. So that is my approach that I use, which outlines all the steps that you can go through, and all the questions that you can ask yourself, or that you ask yourself. So Fola briefly touched upon it earlier. So there's a guide which you can download at makebetterstrategy.com. It's a free guide which kind of takes you through these 3 key steps, and it gives you some pointers of what to think about and what questions to ask yourself and where you could find answers to these questions.
That's a good one. We have a resource for you. So as soon as this actually ends, you need to go on the link and click. We're going to put that link so you can actually have that downloaded. That's a resource that you can go through totally and really, really well reading as well. It can actually help you jumpstart that actual process. Another question. What challenges, Dr. Marc, have you faced in your career when it comes to paving the path to become this successful? And what are the lessons that you have learned that we can leverage?
One of the key challenges is when I started my career as a consultant. So when I came out of business school, and one of the key challenges at the time was that I tried to apply the stuff that we learned about business school. So all the frameworks and the stuff that they teach you when they teach traditional strategy, let's say. And I very often or very quickly learned that it's very difficult to make that actually work. So that's why I, over time, developed this approach that I now call the strategy launchpad. So it's a clear process which you need. So most strategy books don't really talk about what is the process of developing a strategy. So they give you parts of the process, but not really tell you how to apply them and how to put these different parts together so that you have a end-to-end process that actually gives you also a strategy at the end. So that was one of the big challenges. And another big challenge is a lot of organizations, they do lots of competitor analysis and kind of looking at best practices when they develop the strategy. And the challenge really is to implement or to bring innovation into your strategy. So that's the second challenge that I kind of faced. So how can we make strategies more creative? How can we bring innovation in? Which made me then do some research on business model innovation and strategic innovation at the time, which turned into these 2 books that you see behind me, to bring innovation really back into strategy. And the third challenge is the human aspect, really. So doing strategy is nice, and then we all know these big 200-pound PowerPoint or 200 slides PowerPoint decks with strategy, but it's all about the people afterwards who have to actually make it happen, who have to implement it. So the third element is really that thinking how you can involve and engage people from throughout your organization, and maybe even from outside of the organization, so important stakeholders, into your strategy process. So that's really 3 key. And the other thing that I said at the beginning, I was always kind of companies have this idea that you can do a strategy in a 2-day retreat. And I would kind of fall into that and say, yeah, we can do that, but it just doesn't work that way. So over time, I became more firm in my stance to say, we need at least 4 or 5 workshops of 2 days, and then you still only have like 2 weeks or 10 days where you can make it happen, but it needs some more time. And obviously, also executives who have gone through this process, they acknowledge that if you let them think for a little bit longer, also in between workshops, to give them some time to reflect upon things, the quality of their strategies becomes so much better.
I know beyond just the 1-day exercise, I believe it's one that has to go on through the life circle of the organization. It's just ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
Things are constantly changing. The markets are constantly evolving. And you have to, always be there to adapt and respond to change as well. I love the fact that we just had Bahi, who said we need to ask probing questions and get enough information to formulate a baseline reorder to know what needs to be done to achieve the ultimate goal. That's right. We are in business to create value. And as a project professional, you have to be there to help accelerate value as well for the organization. Another piece is, now that we've obviously found that there is a disconnect at times from the C-suite organizations. They have the ideas at the foot level, soldiers level. They have a different idea, right? How can we begin to educate our C there has to be that full flow. Strategy is all about everyone being involved to be part of this to drive the change. When they really may not be fully involved, how can we get them to start embracing that strategy is always on and it involves every one of us?
Mhm. So I think it's about having strategic conversations. So, and what I encourage my clients to do is once we start implementing the strategy, is having regular conversations at least once a month, kind of thing, with key people from throughout the organization. And then there was 4 questions that I always encourage them to ask. So the first one is about action. So are we actually doing what we committed to? So you have the strategy, and out of the strategy, you have the projects, you have the initiatives. Are you actually working on these things? Are you doing what you're supposed to do and what you committed to doing? The second question is about results and outcomes. So are we seeing the results and the outcomes that we wanted to see? And so sometimes you have a strategy, you implement stuff, but then maybe the assumptions you had when you formulated the strategy are not true, right? So they are not validated and you don't see the outcomes. So focus on the outcomes. And then the third question is always about anything new coming up, any new insights, any new challenges that we need to discuss, or that we need to take into account in order to maybe update our strategy, any new ideas that we have. And the final bit is about the spirit and the mood in the organization. So is everybody still on board with the strategy? Is everybody still convinced that this is the right way to go or not? So have a conversation about these 4 things, and then obviously always ask, when it's a yes, no, and no, if no, why not? What is keeping us? Again, what are the barriers that are coming up? What are the barriers that we see, and how can we deal with them to move forward? And that's going back then what you said about this, as I said, the always on kind of strategy, so to make it really a constant living thing. And I have some clients who say, no, we're not going to do this every month, we're going to do it every week even. So really engage in keep on having those strategic conversations throughout the organization, and then it becomes really a living thing. And then you really work on your strategy all the time, and you also build the capabilities of the people throughout the organization to think more strategically if you keep on asking these questions and engaging in these types of conversations.
There is an opportunity here. You can become a driver that helps shape your organization to become the ones that are the frontier of creating something more sustainable. So this is a chance for you. We're going to try and take 1 or 2 more questions. I have one I could just put on the screen. What is the tips to keep the strategy targeted towards sustainable growth over time?
Yeah. So that's what I just mentioned. So keep on engaging in these conversations. Really, I think it's going to help to stay on track and stay focused on the growth. If that's your ambition, and then you deal with the challenges as they come along. Right? Maybe a short example here. So I like this example of I think it was Professor Richard Rummel who first brought it up about Netflix. So Netflix obviously is in the streaming business, so you can say, okay, that's the strategy. But Rumble is very much about this idea of challenge-based strategy, as he calls it. So what is really the challenge for keeping you from reaching your ambitions? And so you could see Netflix, for example. So initially they were the only ones, or one of the only ones doing streaming, and they licensed all their content from the big studios. Right? But at some point, the big studios actually saw that there's lots of money to be made in streaming, and they set up their own platforms, and competition started coming in. So there was more competition for the programs, and it became more difficult for Netflix to actually license content. So how did they solve the challenge? They started doing their own content. So you have things like House of Cards, which was their own production. Right? Then as they went along, another challenge came up. Well, doing their own productions in the House of Cards kind of stuff is very expensive. So they run into an issue of being profitable. At the same time, with their international expansion, it became more important, or customers asked for more local content and not just US-based content. So they had another challenge they needed to solve, and they kind of solved both of these challenges with engaging more with local production. So licensing local content, which the big studios are not so interested in, smaller independent productions. And that helped on the one hand with getting new content, getting international content, and it was a little bit cheaper. So that's a good example of kind of how you work through these challenges as you go along. And the core strategy of streaming, you might say, didn't change really. But it's about how to make it work.
I know the key here is it's all about adaptability. The particular framework that we talk about becoming a strategic project leader, it's that strategic mindset, looking beyond today, adaptability. You think about Blockbuster, right? Whoever thought that we're not going to have BlackBerry phones today? It's unbelievable. Apple came in and took the market. But the key here is that how can you become the driver? How can you become the one who helps your organization, keep on that path to stay competitive? You do not need to be the CEO today, but you can start engaging in strategic conversations with your teams, asking the right questions, challenging the status quo to say, how are we looking at the markets? How can we position our projects, our teams? What are the capabilities that we have and how we positioned for success that we want to create? Dr. Marc, I want to say thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
It's been a great pleasure. It's been, oncoming for so long. I know there's so much to definitely unpack. As Dr. Marc has actually said to you, strategy is not a day exercise. It's one that involves you. You don't need to become the CEO to be part of the strategic conversations. You need the mindset, you need the attitude. What is going to be your final words you want to leave us with today?
Well, so the final tip in terms of connecting to what you just said. So really think about the activities that you personally engage in day to day in your business. Are they in line with strategy? Do they contribute to strategy or not? So that's really the most powerful way I think everybody can contribute to strategy.
Okay, ask yourself those questions every day, because at the end of the day, if you're not adding value, there's no point. We are being paid to do that, but we want you to become an accelerator of value. I want to thank everyone who's actually been here. We had people from India, Saudi Arabia. We had a couple of our usuals, Tabana. We had K Cool. We had Chin. The list goes on. We had people from Saudi Arabia, from Riyadh, from Lagos, from Morocco, from Casablanca. I want to say thank from California, from Ontario. We want to say thank you for being here today. We had from Dubai as well. As you know, put your questions in the comment after this as well. Dr. Marc is going to be there as we're trying to answer and cover some of them. We had from Cameroon as well, from Dala. I want to say thank you so much for doing this, for being here today. But you know that, as I always say, that you are your life's project manager. For all of this to make any sense, for you to create success for organizations, for you to create success for businesses, for you to become that value accelerator, it takes you to take action. Today, I want to know in the comments, what's the one step you're going to be taking? What's the one thing you're going to be doing from today going forward? Is it about asking better questions? Is it about understanding what the markets are saying? Is it about understanding even how technology is going to impact your organization? Whatever that looks like, you play an important role to create the career. You play an important role to create the organization that you want to actually be in and actually lead. Thank you so much for being here. Same time next week, we're going to be here talking about how you, as a project professional, can elevate and become even way better to shape not just your career, organizations, as well as the global economy. Thank you so much, and see you same time next week. Bye-bye.